Remember the good old days? Getting off the school bus, grabbing your favorite snack, putting on your favorite show, and firing up the Game Boy? Yeah, well, now you're bald, your knees hurt, you have a full-time job, and the excitement for the week is picking which bell pepper you want for your hummus. But hey, at least we have a little piece of our childhood left, albeit a little updated. Okay, that whole intro was a half joke, actually, like my life. So what this is the G-Pi Case 2 from Retroflag. It's a handheld device powered by a Raspberry Pi CM4 that very closely resembles the original Game Boy. I mean, just holding it brings back memories of the inside of a middle school locker. The device itself is all plastic, just like its grandpa, except that it adds 4 additional buttons on the front, 2 trigger buttons on the rear, and you get a built-in 4,000 milliamp hour battery that is rechargeable via the USB-C port on the bottom. The screen is a 3-inch TFT backlit display with a resolution of 640 by 480, which looks really good, to be honest. So obviously the point of this device is to install an emulation operating system like RetroPie or Recalbox, and to get that hit of nostalgia for about 10 minutes and then never touch it again. I personally went with Recalbox as I like the interface and features right out of the box. Installation isn't too difficult. Simply pop in your CM4 into the back of the case and you should hear a snap, not a crack. The next step will differ depending on whether your CM4 has built-in eMMC storage or not. Mine does, so we will need to flash the onboard storage with the latest version of Recalbox. To do this, you'll want to download RPI Boot and run this while your setup is plugged into your PC. From here, your PC will see the onboard storage just as any other removable media, and you'll be able to flash it using the native Raspberry Pi imaging software. Fortunately, Recalbox is a default option to choose from, which makes this really easy. The last step is to run the display patch that allows the CM4 to output to the G-Pi screen. Instructions for this are found on the G-Pi website. Don't worry, if you can click a mouse, then you can install the patch. Once that's done, simply unplug it, turn it on, and after some initializing, you're ready to go. I'll walk you through some of the basic configurations I made and how to get your games loaded, but if you're looking for a full Recalbox walkthrough guide, this ain't it, homie. The first thing I immediately did was go into the UI settings and swap the confirm and back buttons as they're backwards by default. Or maybe you like them this way and you're a serial killer or something, but yeah, that's what I did. After that, go ahead and connect it to your Wi-Fi if your board supports it. This will allow you to use the self-hosted web GUI, which makes adding and editing games a breeze. Once this is complete, you can go and access the GUI by going to any browser and entering the IP address of your G-Pi. From here, you can make changes to various settings and, more importantly, add your ROMs. Go ahead and choose your system, then simply upload the ROM file using the GUI. You can make changes to the metadata and even add custom cover art. You'll also want to head over to the Retroflag support site and follow the instructions for installing the Safe Shutdown script. This basically tells the Pi to shut down safely when you hit the power switch rather than just cutting all power. After this, you're pretty much ready to play. I went into the controller settings just to make sure all the buttons were mapped correctly, then I was ready to game. So how does it run? Well, pretty freaking good. The CM4 has more than enough power for your old Game Boy Advance games, and other retro consoles from that era. I even played some of my favorite N64 titles on here, although the form factor isn't really the best for certain titles. However, we do have a trick up our sleeve. The G-Pi 2 has an optional dock accessory that allows you to drop your device in it and have it connected to your TV or monitor over HDMI. The dock also has a USB-C port for charging and 2 USB Type-A ports for storage and for other accessories. You don't need the dock. You can pretty much go with any USB-C hub, but the dock just makes it easier. When connected to the dock, I can enjoy my games so much better, considering I can use an actual controller and play on a screen that's bigger than my. One thing to note though is that it doesn't seem like there's a good way to auto switch between the G-Pi screen and HDMI, so you'll need to reboot to switch, and I'm sure there's someone out there smarter than me that's written a script to figure this out, but I couldn't figure it out. There are plenty of different systems loaded onto here, and if you don't see a system, it's probably because the Raspberry Pi wouldn't run it very well anyway. At a cost of $80, it's certainly not a terrible deal, $90 if you want the optional dock included. Just note that this does not come with a CM4, so you'll have to sell your body for one of those. If you're attractive enough or lucky enough to get one of those, then I think it's a pretty awesome little device. The screen is great, the form factor is solid, the buttons feel nice, and battery life is decent. If you want one, please consider using my affiliate links down below. Okay, so I was just editing the video and I realized that I never really gave my candid impressions of it as a whole, and I never showed you like real gameplay and kind of reacted to that. So that's what we're going to do now. Here I have loaded up one of my favorite titles from yesteryear. This is Super Smash Bros. For the N64, and it runs pretty well. In the menus, it does slow down a bit. You can see in the bottom left what percentage, what speed it's running at. And you can see we're getting full 100% during actual gameplay, which is awesome. However, like I said, during the menu, it drops down to 30 for some reason. But, you know, I don't really care too much about that. And yeah, all the titles I've tried with the N64 have run perfectly fine. And obviously the Game Boy games and older Nintendo and Super Nintendo console and titles worked perfectly as well. So I have no issues with it as a whole running as an emulation machine. There are a couple issues though with the setup. You can see that I'm using a regular controller, a regular wired controller, and that is because I tried to pair my Xbox, whatever one this is. I have two of them, and I tried to pair both of them through Bluetooth, and it worked. It said that the controller was connected via Bluetooth, but the controller just wouldn't do anything in the system. So yeah, I don't know if that's a product of Recalbox or the GPie itself, but I just couldn't get my Xbox controllers to work with it over Bluetooth. Another thing that's an issue is that going from using the controller back to the built-in buttons on the GPie is kind of annoying, because I found that it still thinks that I'm using the other controller that I have set up when I switch back and forth. Even when I toggle which controller configuration I use in the settings, it just doesn't like that. So I have to reconfigure the button mappings every time I go from a controller back to the handheld itself, which is kind of annoying and could come down to user error. But again, it's just my experience and I have to tell you guys about it. And if you want to plug it into a big screen and use it just like that, I've shown that that works perfectly fine. It's just the issue of going from handheld to the big screen and from the built-in controls to a controller and not being able to auto switch the video and having to turn it off and back on. There's just too many things that are annoying to switch back and forth between the two. So I would personally just pick one way to use it, whether that's handheld or plugged into your system, but just know that you can do both, but it's kind of a pain. So that's what I think of the GPie Case 2 and using it with Recalbox. Back to the regular video. All right, it's time for comment of the week. This one comes from Haim Peretz. I probably butchered your name. I'm sorry. This comes on the video about my Open Media Vault first impressions, and he says, in the past, I used Open Media Vault with a Raspberry Pi 4 8 gigabytes with an Argon M.2 case and an 8 terabyte external drive, and a lot of Docker containers. All works great. The only reason I moved to an i7 7700 was because I needed more CPU power for the Plex Docker containers. I agree. I think the Raspberry Pi is an excellent starting solution for Open Media Vault and messing around. Although it is limited on power, that's for sure. The Raspberry Pi isn't designed to be a powerhouse. I think it's a really excellent starting point. And like we see here, you can easily migrate to a more powerful CPU in the future. But that's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it entertaining. If you did, please drop a like. And if you think I'm the bee's knees, then maybe hit that subscribe button. I hear if you hit the subscribe button really hard, make a wish, and count down from 10 in Spanish, then your therapist will charge you double. All right, shout out to my YouTube members and Patreons. You're the real MVPs. If you want to help support the channel or join the Discord, links are down in the description. But if you got this far in the video, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.